Hello and welcome to my presentation, the after action review to my seminar, Gamification of Strategic Thinking. I'm Lieutenant Colonel General Staff Thorsten Kodalle from the Bundeswehr Command and Staff College, and I prepared this presentation with sound on my Surface Pro 3, 4 years old, using my PlayStation 4 headset. So first, a disclaimer. I never have done this seminar before. This is a prototype, a pilot from the construction on. It has never been tested. So I expected frictions and I got them. And the pandemic circumstance was, of course, the worst case scenario for all participants, because we all have to do the whole thing in complete isolation and completely distributed, which was of course not foreseen. So everybody was part of a research and development team anyway. International professional wargamers are supposed to watch us in my Slack workspace. And this is of course a gamification seminar, so don't forget the fun. This is actually from Professor Werbach on his gamification framework, where it is called D6, and the last D is for don't forget the fun. So there is sometimes something funny about this because it's gamification. So it may contain traces of nuts, but no animals were hurt during the development and facilitation of this seminar, but you will get a few cat pictures. The title of the seminar is Gamification of Strategic Thinking, subtitle, A Gamified Approach to Experience and Agile Mindset. It is supposed to be a research, development and education experiment using the commercial off-the-shelf board game Scythe from the 16th to 18th of March 2020. You could also call this seminar How to Play a Recreational War Game in a Professional Way, because of course we used a commercial off-the-shelf board game to facilitate this learning experience. And due to COVID-19, we need to improvise on a very short notice, and we distributed a complete online edition of the seminar. This is the agenda for my presentation. I split the presentation in several parts. This is the very first part with the introduction, and I will cover the problem and the terminology. And I have a separate presentation or part of this presentation with sound in a separated file for strategic thinking, another one for the online facilitation, and a last one for the results. So let's start with the first chapter and the description of the basic problem, the fundamental problem we have in strategic thinking. On a very fundamental level, you should always think before you act. However, I put Dietrich Dörner and Friedmund Malik here on the slide because they are German experts on strategic thinking and managing complexity, and they provide two basic insights for good and bad decision making. One of the problem is the ballistic decision making process, in the sense of you are making a decision and then you fire it away just like a cannonball, and it just flies and it hits somewhere with a lot of collateral damage maybe. You do not really have the capability to adjust the flight path. However, Dietrich Dörner measured the good decision maker and he recognized that a good decision maker is actually able to adjust the trajectory. And he actually used the example of an anti-tank missile on a wire that can be adjusted during flight and put on the moving target. So that would be one thing to do to prevent bad decision making, being able to adjust it. This was, of course, a kind of agile planning capability. And Fredmund Malik in his book put out that strategic decisions based on operational data are, of course, very short-sighted and also might lead to a complete failure of your company. And you are going bankrupt if you don't take into account future scenarios and you are just planning with the data that is just on very short sight. So, and of course, Seneca also provided us with some insight a few hundred years ago. So let's start. So in a way, this is a kind of how-to guide, how to do strategic thinking. On the very, very first level, you need to consider your strategic environment, then apply a strategic framework, and then you do a strategy implementation. Easier said than done. From a military perspective, following classical strategic thinkers like Clausewitz, we like to apply this ends, ways, and means approach. Concerning the ends, you consider your strategic objectives you want to achieve, and concerning the ways, you are trying to managing something, you are trying to scaling something, maybe you will enhance something. And concerning means, there are capabilities, there are certain characteristics, there is a development, and there is a delivery. So let's look more into detail. This is a very, very busy slide. And I don't want to go into all the details. You should take away that there are certain strategic management domains, and that strategic management involves strategic planning, which is analytical, and strategic thinking, that is more synthetic. So strategic planning provides inputs for strategic thinking. The output is a strategy. If you look to the right on the strategy planning, the analytical side, finding the dots is the important things to do. And a computer assisted exercise, a CAX, a war gaming, please notice that wargaming is written separately, is something different than on the left side, the synthetic approach, where you are supposed to connect all the dots you just found. And manual wargaming, please also recognize that wargaming here is written in one word. Manual wargaming is supposed to provide very, very basic insights. So why use gamification? Well, a very, very basic answer is gamification works. Sometimes with unintended consequences, but gamification actually works. And if applied correctly, you will get a high intrinsic motivation. People will work against their personal benchmarks. They want to get group recognition, and they like to train in a narrative. Humans are storytelling beings, and a gamification approach usually provides you with a certain narrative. So there is a behavioral change, there's a higher retention rate, and the 21st century skills like communication, creativity, critical thinking skills, and collaborations can really be put into effect and trained. Let's move to terminology. Terminology for wargaming is a huge and open field with several books written about it, and depending on your perspective, very different connotations. So I put the wargaming definition from the RAND Corporation here on display, but I will let's move a little bit further. I don't want to go too much into details concerning the terminology. I just want to point out a few terms. So upper left, wargaming is in two separate words, and upper right, wargaming together. This is a kind of differentiation between two wargaming communities. The wargaming community that is writing wargaming in a separate way is more on the more military operations research and computer-based wargaming side. And the wargaming community that writes wargaming in one word is more on the manual wargaming, but also on the recreational wargaming side. Serious gaming can be considered a kind of application of a serious kind of wargaming. Gamification from the American understanding of this term would cover a complete game, and on the more British side of the definition of gamification, it would only apply to certain parts of a game and certain techniques and methods applied in games that would be transferred to the real world. All of this could be part of game-based learning, GBL. So there is a kind of shadow area where maybe a few of these terms actually intermingle and overlap. So my recommendation for anybody who has no idea about wargaming whatsoever is to get the Wargaming Handbook from 2017 from the British MOD. And this is really great, an easy read and a great introduction into the whole variety of wargaming and the several applications you can have for wargaming, from the educational seminar style wargaming up to the analytical courses of action analysis style of wargaming. And on the right you see on page 36 one of my friends who actually developed a cyber strategy game, which is here on display. And of course there is a Clausewitz citation I couldn't refuse to put up here. In the whole range of human activities, war most closely resembles a game of cards, which was actually the reason and justification for me developing a cyber resilience card game. So one of the great giants of wargaming, Peter Perler, provided us with this very basic and fundamental insight. We may never know the right answers, but gaming can sometimes help us learn to ask the right questions. And this is, of course, the most basic fundament for all strategic thinking, having the right questions and the important questions you really need to answer. So this part of the presentation ends, and please open the next part, strategic thinking, where I will tell you all you need to know about strategic thinking in the context of the commercial off-the-shelf board game Scythe.